What's up gamers, DreamcastGuy here, talking today about Sony and censorship. Because despite the fact that the PlayStation 4 is just such a massive console, the people behind it sometimes make choices that are a little bit confusing. Over the course of the last 6 months or so, we've started to see Sony step in and actually ban certain games from their platform, and I'm a little bit mixed on it. I will admit, I am very against censorship, especially in video games. Mostly because I feel like if you're trying to change any part of art, it's going to end up influencing the overall project. I mean, one of my favorite games of all time is actually this, Final Fantasy X. Now, if you've never played this, it actually has some pretty heavy themes in it. Stuff that is quite a bit anti-religion, it has a lot of stuff about life and death and meaning, and really, it's something that has some very heavy tones, and each part of it comes together to make a story that is marvelous, but it needs to be complete in order for it to be this good. If somebody had tried to step in at some point and change even a single piece of it, I don't think that this would have been nearly as much of an RPG masterpiece. Which is why, in general, I am very anti-censorship. Which is why a lot of this stuff that we're going to be talking about today is very bizarre to me and a little bit disheartening. So it seems like throughout 2018, we started to see this new Sony show up. One that is very against mostly dating simulator style games, or more anime stuff. I'm going to be honest, a lot of the stuff we're about to be digging into are really kind of weird, quirky, well, anime games. But even still, I think that these have a legitimate audience. Mostly because, if you don't know this, a ton of very niche series actually got their start on the PlayStation Vita and the PlayStation 3. There were all sorts of dating games or weird combat games with people wearing bikinis that actually got their start on Sony platforms and ended up growing a huge fan base. There are literally millions of people out there who bought a PlayStation 3 or a PS Vita because they wanted to get access to these really quirky games. Some of them have even started to make their way over to the PlayStation 4, like Onichinbara Z2 Chaos. This is a game where you're a bikini-wearing cowboy killing vampires. And yes, that sounds really quirky, but it's fantastic. It's super fun, despite the fact that it looks so bizarre. But what's really weird is that this game definitely would not be allowed by modern Sony, even though back in 2014 when it was released, it was totally okay. So over the course of 2018, we started to see Sony step in and specifically squash some very random games. Like one of them was Super Seducer. This is a supposedly instructional game that teaches people how to date women. And to be honest, if you use this advice, you're gonna get beat up. It's so cringy and so awful. I mean, seriously, the guy who made that game has definitely never talked to a woman in his life. And so that's part of what makes it so funny. But when it was about to come out, for some reason, at the very last second, Sony stepped in and blocked it, not allowing it to be released anywhere on any PlayStation 4, which was a little bit weird. But honestly, I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just thought, okay, that's weird, but I mean, I guess that happens sometimes. But then we started to see it with other stuff. Now, I'm going to have to read this title here because it's so bizarre that I really pronounce it wrong a lot of times, but it's Senran Kagura Burst Re. This is actually sort of an HD remake of an older dating style game, and it's not something I'll buy. Honestly, even if it came out tomorrow, I wouldn't purchase it. But the people that are into it are very upset, because this was very much set for release when suddenly Sony actually said, if you want to make it, you gotta take out certain game modes. Now, I will fully admit that the mode that Sony wants them to remove is a little bit weird. I'll fully admit that, but it's still not super bad by any means. It's called the Intimacy mode, and it lets the players touch the characters' titter-tatters. There, that's the most politically correct way I can say that. And it's something that I would never play. I would definitely not purchase it, but I'm also not against other people purchasing it. It's just something that I think is completely fine. I guess one of the things is I feel like we're starting to see this new age of Sony come about because of their massive, massive success. A lot of people, whether you like it or not, are beginning to view Sony as the default console. If you're going to the store and you can only afford to get an Xbox, a PlayStation, or a Nintendo Switch, a lot of people are picking the PS4 simply because it is already so ubiquitous. It is so massive that it gets the most exclusives, the most games, it has the biggest online communities. And I think that Sony is starting to look at their massive market share and go, okay, it's time to buckle down. It's time to be more serious. And this seems kind of strange to me because, in general, I think that Sony has had an amazing past of not censoring stuff. Throughout the ages, we've actually seen Sony try and be at the forefront of early publishing, putting out games that are very, very quirky or indie-like, or allowing games that are very, very off the wall. Like, just a couple weeks ago, I actually beat Dream Daddy. That is a daddy dating simulator. It's got a bunch of, like, buff dudes who all live in a little neighborhood and they're trying to date each other. And yeah, it's just a quirky dating game, but the writing is hilarious, and the art is really actually pretty sweet. It's something that makes it where I'm glad that games that far out can exist on the PlayStation platform. But suddenly, we're also seeing Sony just step in and squash certain stuff, which has left many fans very, very lost behind the motivations of these actions. Somebody actually got a chance to ask the president of Sony Japan, though, what the heck is going on. During a recent Q&A, somebody said specifically, why are you guys trying to censor stuff? And their official statement from the very guy at the absolute top was that they were trying to make a more standard version of marketing to make it where all games in every country would be uniform. And really, it's that style of language that makes me a tiny bit nervous, because certain countries like China have started trying to implement more strict versions of all sorts of censorship. Like, in some countries, you may not know this, but gambling is super, super illegal. In fact, you're not even allowed to talk about gambling. That's why certain things like Pokemon trading card game, as cute and innocent as that game is, it's been banned in a couple countries. So if they start trying to make a uniform policy for all censorship, does that mean that we can never have a casino in a game? If I'm playing something and there's just a random side quest to try and gamble in Red Dead Redemption 2, will that not be allowed? I guess that's the thing, is that Sony, in their quest to try and be as accessible as possible, is simultaneously paying the price of having to give up a certain amount of their own quirky charm. Sony, you guys have done so much right. I think that your first-party games are getting bigger and better every single quarter, but I think you also need to realize that third-party is a massive strength. Everybody now is coming up with some really good and really solid ideas, and they want to publish on your system, which means that just by allowing them to exist, you are going to get more rich. How do you stay out of the way? Well, I think that's kind of the key, is figuring out how much you want to not intrude. Now, if a game is very, very across the line, I do think that it needs to be squashed. I don't think it's censorship to block a game. If somebody decided to make a game that's called, like, Child Killing Simulator, and all you did was shoot kids, yeah, I don't think that needs to be released. I mean, maybe that's controversial, but I don't think something like that should be allowed on the PlayStation, because obviously it would lead to very bad headlines and hurt the entire gaming industry. But if somebody's just trying to make a game where you can walk up and, I don't know, be creepy and talk to frickin' your college schoolmates or whatever, I mean, that's not across the line in my opinion. Is it weird? Yeah, but just don't support it. That's kind of my philosophy is, everybody is willing to vote with their wallets. Look at something that's completely bombed recently, like a lot of big games like Fallout 76. That was supposed to be a massive, massive release, but people were willing to make their own decisions and vote with their wallets. I think that's about to happen again with Anthem, with people just straight up not buying it because there's so much distrust around BioWare. Sony, you're in the perfect spot. You have all the power, you have all the influence, and everybody is watching you in a positive light. If anything, the media completely loves every single thing you guys do, and you keep trying to make more changes to improve the way you look. Crushing games, trying to push around indie developers, probably isn't the smartest functionality overall. You guys are really getting into uncharted territory here because there's never quite been a console as massive and powerful and quite honestly profitable as you guys are right now. So I say, start to worry about the online store in a different light. Don't censor things, but instead try and cull the absolute trash. There should not be something like Life of Black Tiger or these really bad cell phone games on the PlayStation 4. Worry about taking out those before you worry about one more weird dating game. But these have just been my 2 cents. What do you guys think? Tell me about your ideas of censorship, the idea of trying to change games just for get better sales, and everything like that in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Oh man, I have a feeling this video is gonna have some really spicy comments. I'm definitely going to go down there and read them because I'm ready for this. I'm ready. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.